Helena was bringing up an example of normativity under a physicalist view, which I wanted to see if you could discuss with her.
This is more of naturalism, right? I don't like the word physicalism. I think the distinction between the physical and the mental is a false distinction we need to do away with. It's antiquated, it's left over from Descartes, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
You just
I don't
hold some sort of like
to be a physicalist is to accept this distinction, and I don't.
So you're just like a neutral monist or something?
Naturalist is, I think, probably the best, or I guess I should say, after having read that article, real naturalist.
Which, if it's the case that it like countenances like mental properties, it sounds like neutral.
Well, what do you mean by mental?
Well, so it would just be stuff that's different. Like, so you'd have different, like, in the same way that you have different elements, right? You just have different kinds of stuff floating around.
I'm probably a monist of some kind for sure.
It's all like anomalous monism.
What I thought a neutral monist was somebody who thought there was one substance, but we didn't have a clear view. What? Hello?
Danny is hot, Mikey.
He's talking to somebody else.
Oh, my bad.
Neutral meaning I don't know what kind it is, but there's only one kind of whatever kind that is, right? So I don't say there's a mental, I don't say there's a physical. There's only one thing, but I'm neutral to it because I don't think we have it right either way. Something like that.
I think a good example is like Davidson's anomalous monism.
So he's an anomalous monist, though, right?
Which is a kind of neutral monism, I think.
Do you think that there are non-rational entities, Brenda, or like is a non-rational state like that's coherent to you, right?
No.
So you think everything is rational?
Well, I don't know. What do you mean by rational here?
Like that it itself has truth or falsity. That there's kind of something inferential about it. It can be inferred. That kind of thing.
Well, rocks aren't natural. I mean, rational.
Okay.
You said by rational, it has a true or false about it?
There's a truth or falsity to it. There can be potentially a truth or falsity.
Trees aren't true or false.
Right.
So true or false seems to me to apply to statements or expressions of propositions.
Yeah.
Right.
Expressions of propositions.
Yeah, that's what I would go
with. But why isn't it the case, if someone were to ask you why no, I think that trees express truth or falsity, we just haven't yet discovered it, or we just need to develop the technology, how would you respond?
Show me the evidence.
No, that they're saying in principle it's possible. There's no contradiction in saying that we can discover truth or falsity to trees. We don't see truth or falsity to trees yet, but we in principle can.
I would say that trees aren't the kinds of things that can be true or false.
Why not?
Because they're not statements.
Well, we could discover statements, potentially.
What?
Are statements physical?
No, but the idea, this is how it sounds like.
I don't understand you at all. I really don't.
Exactly.
He's trying to give you a sense of how strange it feels to him, why they get an uproar, because it sounds like you're saying, it sounds like you think there's some kind of thing that's like a rock that can think. And so I think that's a really good example, Danny.
Yeah, the idea is that you want to say in principle we can discover consciousness or what it really is. Okay, but I think consciousness is just intentionality, which deals with, rational states or truth and falsities and stuff. So when we're saying that in principle we can develop technology to discover these things, observe these truth and falsity within the brain, right? It's like saying that we can in principle discover propositions and truth or falsity to trees, and I don't think that there's a difference, right? I don't think that if there's no contradiction in saying that we can discover truth and falsity within the brain, then there's no contradiction when it comes to saying that we can, in principle, discover truth or falsity about of trees.
So let me just really quick. So what I think, one of the things I got out of what Danny was saying, if you think about yourself, what you went through when Danny started saying things like, do you think trees are true or false, or something like that? Maybe we could discover that trees are true or false. It's, in my opinion, it's because of this. Why it seemed so outrageous is because you had already in your head, in your mind, for the dualist, an understanding of these categories that were distinct, right? You even said trees aren't the kind of things that can be true. So you went into his suggestion with an already presumed and conclusion, right, about what kinds of things are true, what kinds of things aren't, and you have two categories there. So they have that same kind of thing when you try to talk to them. They already think there are these two distinct either things or whatever, property, however they want to think of it. Okay. So when you say, so that is where the outrage comes from. It just seems ludicrous to them because they have these categories set up ahead of time in their heads.
Seems to me like there's a difference, however, which is I can simply explain succinctly what my problem is. It's just a category error. And they can't explain what their objection.
They say the same thing. They say the same thing. They say, "Look, you're claiming that a mental thing is physical, but there are these clear categories. There's a clear distinction. I already know it. So it's like saying to me that you think a tree is true."
And the idea is that I don't think there's any kind of criteria you could pose. That or any kind of argument other than like a conceptual argument to rebut my claim that in principle that trees are not the kinds of things that we could potentially discover truth or falsity to. Like I think like I would be interested in what you would say, right? And I think anything that you give me is going to be applicable to brain.
So you would accept non-conceptual arguments?
No, I'm saying that there's no criteria that you could give me that would be just true of the tree and not true of the brain.
Trees aren't the kinds of things that can be true or false.
I understand that's the claim, right? But what about trees?
It's not a claim. It's just a definition, right? It's a definitional claim, right? I'm defining truth as a property of statements.
Okay, so you wouldn't. Okay, so you define why? Right. You define tree.
When you say that a tree has the property of being true, you're making a category error because truth is only a property of statements.
But that's not a reply to what I'm saying. Right?
You asked for criteria. I just gave you a criteria.
No. I agree with you, right, that we have not discovered anything that would resemble truth or falsity within trees, right? You and I agree on that. But why is it impossible, right, that we can't discover such things?
I just told you.
Because it's not, because you just define you just define a tree as a thing that we can't discover truth or falsity to?
No, you didn't hear me.
Okay. Look, can you repeat what you said?
No. What did I say? Why don't you answer me?
I'm asking you to repeat it.
Truth is a property of sentences. Propositional.
Right, but you're begging the question. I'm saying that trees can have sentences.
No.
Why can't they?
Well, how is not going to be a reply?
I'm just positing the Go ahead.
If you can show me how a tree can have a sentence, then perhaps I would consider.
That's not a response.
I think it is. It is a response.
If I'm positing that
you just didn't like it.
If I'm saying that it's possible, right? You saying that you can't show me, right? That's not going to be an argument for.
If you want to say that there are sentient trees, that's fine.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yes, it is.
I'm saying that no, because you can conceive of a statement or a proposition apart from a mind.
I don't know that you can. I think
Wait, are you a conceptualist?
I think that, this is really annoying, the feedback.
Danny, I think I'm a conceptualist.
The brain
fine,
states, sentences,
about
and propositions are just thoughts in your head, and thoughts are just brain states. So yes, they're physical. So you could show me a tree that is sentient. It would have to be a tree unlike any that I'm aware of, but it is at least logically possible for trees to be sentient.
You see, I would distinguish an attitude and a proposition. Well, you wouldn't? I have attitudes, right, about propositions.
Do you really, though?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to take us off on a tangent.
But the point is
I'll
that
ask you about that part later.
The point is that when I say that it's possible to discover statements or propositions in trees, okay, saying that show me is not going to show that there's a contradiction if you want to say that that's not possible.
Yes, category error is an epistemic objection to a to a concept.
And the thing is that anything that you point out, I think, any property of the tree that you point out as it to show that it's conceptually problematic to say that it could potentially harbor statements, okay, is going to be true
That
of
it
brain
is statements.
Yeah.
I'm accepting that it's possible for trees to be sentient. There's no logical contradiction in trees
like I said,
in trees possessing a sophisticated organization enough that they could have thoughts, and those thoughts could be propositional.
Okay,
These conversations get so fun. Now we're talking about
distinguish-
sentient trees.
But you don't distinguish attitudes and propositions?
Attitudes are beliefs about propositions.
Right. Do you think you could have a belief without an attitude?
A belief is a proposition.
Okay, so you think a belief is just a proposition and not an attitude?
A belief
Because I
is
take them to
a belief is a mental state, right? And it can be either true or false.
Mental is the tradition, the literature, and the notion of belief usually is tied to a propositional attitude. So you have to have, there's an attitude, there's a kind of commitment to a state of affair or a truth.
Don't start saying the literature like all the literature does that.
Well, if you look at the SCP and other statements, that's traditionally what it's taken to be. She might have a different conception of belief, but I think I've heard her say before that beliefs are propositional attitudes.
Well, beliefs are propositions, right?
No, not simply.
I believe that the moon is made out of green cheese, and
the moon is made out of green. The moon is made out of green cheese is the proposition, but there's an attitude of that proposition such that you think that it's true or false. Right?
Okay.
To think that the proposition is true or false, that whole entire entity is the belief, the thought or the attitude geared towards
I'm not sure I
the
would
proposition.
do that. I'm not sure I would
I
do
want to
that.
run this by you now at this point because this is kind of relevant now. I think it's a mistake to unpack the term propositional attitude as though there was an entity that is called a proposition, and we stand in a relation to that entity, and that is our attitude toward it. I think our attitudes are towards whatever is presented by the proposition. So my attitude is towards events, people, things, stuff like that. Now it's true that if I have an attitude towards a person, place, event kind of concept or something like that, that it will turn out that the proposition that describes the event is going to have a truth value. But I don't think we literally have attitudes towards propositions.
Well, if you have an attitude towards a concept, and if concepts are kind of propositionally built, right? It seems like if you have a concept of a tree, right, there are going to be propositions that you're going to recognize, like trees grow, trees have leaves, trees have bark, trees have trunks, right?
So when I believe that trees grow, I'm having a belief about trees. Now, it is true that I would agree that the proposition that trees grow is true, but I'm saying my attitude is towards the trees, and this
Either
other thing maybe is hyper-intentional.
Yeah, but that's fine and all. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But the idea is that she wants to say what Brenda said was that beliefs were just propositions. But I think that I don't know what a belief would be if there were no attitudes or a kind of view. Okay, and I'm saying that if there is a belief, there's going to be a view or an attitude of a concept, proposition, of an abstract, some kind of abstract entity, an idea. Okay.
No, doesn't have to be an abstract entity. The attitude is toward the thing being discussed or being singled out or being pointed at, right? So
Wait,
my attitude is
are you not
toward the tree. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a real reality or if it's all experiential or phenomenal. It comes out the same, right?
Well,
So
you're gonna have a
kind of
concept,
side issue.
right? The concept might be. You're gonna I could add, now that I think about it, I'm fine with granting conceptualism. Even under conceptualism, they would agree that there's a concept in the mind, right, plus an attitude.
Well, no, there's not an extra entity called a concept. Right? I'm just conceptualizing something, right? It doesn't mean that there's an entity now called a concept. Not necessarily, right?
Well, I don't understand what we're disagreeing about, Helena. It's
Okay,
actually.
so all I'm saying is that all I want to say is that if so Brenda's having trouble understanding exactly what you're talking about because you are sort of platonizing, pardon my French,
but I can grant
proposition.
all these. I can grant.
Yeah, that was the sense I got.
Conceptualism.
I got the
So
sense
when
that we were going
okay,
into
so-
Platonism. Yeah.
It's like making a semantic assent. But so
Platonism could be false, and what I'm saying is still sensical.
right, so he wants to. So I was just wanted to come in and explain because when Brenda says, I think Brenda, what you mean when you say something like, no, I'm just saying that the belief, that the proposition is the belief. You mean to say, look, a belief, when it all comes down to it, metaphysically, ontologically, is the stuff in my head, is the neurons and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's
So
what I want to say.
That's all she means to say. And so
Yeah.
she's the idea about attitudes and attitudes towards, that's one assent. And then another assent is that it has to be an attitude towards some kind of entity known as a proposition. Well, no, not really. You have attitudes towards things and events and things like that, and we talk about them. And in order to talk about them, you have to move up a level in abstraction. But it doesn't mean that the attitude is towards the thing that got moved up a level in abstraction.
Well, look, the point is that do we accept that when I believe something, is there an attitude? Yes or no?
For me, yes.
Yes, and that's what she was denying.
No, she wanted to just say the attitude is physical.
Well, then
It reduces down to neurons and things like that.
But I just want to know whether she thinks it's physical or whatever, right? Does she accept that beliefs are attitudes at the very least?
That they require attitudes.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't understand what it would say that I have no attitudes, but I have beliefs.
I can feel ambivalent about beliefs. That's an attitude, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an attitude. So it seems like you have things happening inside you that I think you would feel safe calling attitudes.
Yeah,
right?
but I kind of think
stands on things and stuff like that. You just want to say all that stuff is the neurons and stuff.
Okay, yeah, we're fine.
It's taking place in my head. It's taking place in my head.
I'm not attacking physicalism at the moment. Okay, I just want to say that beliefs seem to be at the very least attitudes. Now, here's the next question: if she accepts that, at the least, beliefs are attitudes. Are attitudes the same thing as propositions? I think she ought to say no. Helena would say no. Okay? And if it's the case that she says no, right, then that means that there in some sense, there are concepts, there are the things that we have attitudes about. Okay? Whether they're conceptualized or real, platonic, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we would quibble a little. I think that the thing we don't have attitudes about really is the extrapolated, abstracted out expression of the attitude.
Okay.
So we don't have an attitude towards the expression of an attitude.
I don't know. I think
right.
humans
But
are the
that's
kinds
a
of
different question.
humans are the kinds of things that can reflect. So I can have perceptions, and then I can reflect on my perceptions. I can have propositional statements, beliefs, and I can have reflections, and I can reflect on my propositional beliefs. I can have attitudes about my beliefs, but it's all taking place inside my head, and it's all the workings of the neurons in my brain.
Okay, so it sounds like you would say, so far with Danny, that you are fine with saying you have attitudes.
I mean, I can imagine a lot of things, and I can imagine things that don't make any sense. So I can imagine, say, a candle flame without a candle and without a wick or without anything. It's just a candle flame. But that's not something that can exist in the physical world, right? But I don't think that really says anything important. The fact that I can imagine things coming apart. Because you can't really have a candle flame without the wax and the wick, right? And the fire. You can't have those things. But I can separate them in my mind. But I don't think that separating them in my mind and imagining them as being separate is really any kind of... It doesn't say anything about reality. It's just imagination.
The point is that when you say... The whole thing is that when I said in principle we could discover concepts, propositions, whatever these kinds of things are, that is not analytically equivalent to beliefs.
Could you name a proposition that's not a belief?
A proposition that's not a belief?
Yeah, you just said we can discover...
I don't need to do that.
You just said we...
I may be too stupid to give you an example. The point is, my claim is that they're not analytically equivalent.
What about not P?
That's just
I got
P.
disconnected in the middle of all this.
That's just P. So, if you're... I don't understand what you're saying now, Danny. I don't understand you.
What I'm saying is, a concept is not... What we mean by concept is not what we mean by belief. I mean, there could... Right? They're not the same.
I'm skeptical, so convince me.
Well, we just went through it. You accepted...
No.
Okay, so do you think you could have attitudes and not have any beliefs? Do you think... Because I think
No, I don't think so. I don't think I can have attitudes without beliefs.
Okay, so that means that the idea is that beliefs are defined in terms of attitudes. Okay? Now, do we say attitudes are the same thing as concepts or propositions or what have you? Numbers?
Yeah. An attitude is a concept. Yes, it is.
An attitude is a concept.
Sure. My attitude... So the proposition God exists is a proposition. My attitude about the proposition God exists is that it's false.
Wait, when I have an attitude of a concept, you're saying I have a concept of a concept?
Okay.
That's problematic.
Why?
Because when we're saying that I have a concept of a concept, that seems like you could potentially have a regress issue. right? I have to think about that.
Potentially, sure.
Okay, but
That doesn't mean I don't think I necessarily have to.
But what I'm saying is, if I have a concept, if I say I have an attitude towards the number 3 or some
Yeah.
let me give a tree. Let's use tree.
My attitude.
When I have an attitude about a tree, right? That means that might imply. Well, that doesn't even make sense because it seems like attitudes.
Why can't I have an attitude about tree? They're threatening.
Well, that's
They
gonna
scare me.
reduce to something like I have an attitude about certain propositions, not just because I think that
Well,
we're gonna
I don't
break
think-
that down.
I don't think there's.
Right?
I don't think there's any way to express an attitude without forming a proposition, is there?
Yeah.
If I have an attitude,
I agree.
right?
I agree. So the point is that if I have an attitude of something else, which means that they're
Wait.
Yeah,
Attitude of?
Yeah, this is just
Yeah.
what
You have
Helena was saying.
attitudes of.
I have an
Yeah, of
attitude
course you
of
can.
A certain
No,
proposition.
no.
Wait,
You have
that's what
attitudes toward. You don't have attitudes
towards.
of.
Okay. Well, okay. Towards. I'm sorry. Towards. The idea is that they're distinct. Right. What you have the object of the attitude, whatever you have the towardness of, right, is going to be different than the attitude itself. And that's what I want to say, that attitudes and these concepts that we have, these propositions, what have you, are not the same thing. She wants to say they are the same thing.
No. We already been through this. No.
Yeah, I think that I got disconnected, but let me see if I can summarize what I think well, the lines along which you're thinking now, Brenda, and see if I'm on the mark or not on the mark. You want to say you would agree with Danny. You have attitudes, and you can just think of them as like reactions, right? Your responses.
Yeah.
So if you have responses and reactions, well, there's something that they're about, right? So it can't be the case that the reaction is the same thing as the thing it's about.
Yes.
Well,
that's
Yes,
what
I
I'm saying.
understand. I understand that, and I
Okay.
think I'll accept that. Yeah.
Okay, so these things, right? This category of things that which we can add attitudes of or towards. Okay, what if I said that those are discoverable in trees? Right now, what I'm not saying, right, is whether the attitude plus these categories are discoverable, but merely the objects of our attitudes. Okay? And in that sense, there are going to be things that are discoverable in principle that are not beliefs.
Well, if I let me. I'm a little confused now. So
Yeah,
if I
me too.
discover
Me
that
too.
a tree, that this tree has bark, that's something about the tree that I have an attitude toward, right? So I'm a little wondering now if I had understood you correctly at the beginning when we were talking about sentient trees. So like I could have an attitude about the tree when I discover, like, let's presume realism, or if you want, we can presume phenomenalism, but I just don't want to have to say the experience of all over the place. But any kind of observational discovery is an object toward which I can have an attitude.
I was just saying that there's a concept we formed of bark, right? Right, there's a concept of tree, there's a concept of bark, right? And those concepts, right, are not the same thing as the thing in the world, in which brings about our representation or whatever.
Well,
Oh, yeah, that's okay with me, I suppose. I mean, if you want to, it is making like some kind of ascension there, but I don't think that it would be a problem. So I guess the way I would try to translate that is, look, as humans, we have, and let's just say it's physical for now, something physical is such that we can conceptualize. Like we can make universals, we can draw circles around things and put them into sets, right? And all of that stuff is like happening perhaps physically in your head. So it's still the case that when you think of trees, Um, if you are discussing the idea of trees, that's different than actually discussing trees.
Right. And
So
I'm
the same
saying
kind of attitude that you have towards trees is an attitude, right? You can have an attitude towards trees. Well, you can also have an attitude towards a conceptualization of trees.
either one, what I want to say is that why is it not, on Brenda's view, possible that we can discover those conceptualizations, whether they're real or not? Okay, real in the sense that whether they're just purely mental or not, or of the mind, in trees.
I think it's
Oh, I
possible.
see.
It might be possible for us to discover that trees are sentient.
No, but that's not. But sentience, you see, I think sentience requires either some kind of experience, like qualitative state, which is not what I'm talking about, or intentional state, which is not what I'm talking about.
But
I
those
get
are
it. I get what
necessary.
you're saying.
Those are necessary for trees to have beliefs.
Well, he's not really saying trees. I think. Let me see. I think what he's saying is, look, we agree you can have an attitude toward the actual tree. We agree that you can conceptualize trees and have an attitude towards the conceptualization. When you think about having an attitude towards the actual tree, something like the bark or some kind of thing like that, there isn't that extra layer of abstraction. When you think about having an attitude towards that extracted thing or that conceptualized thing, the idea of trees, that's nonetheless an attitude. It's an attitude towards a conceptualization, let's say. Now that is something that belongs to us. It doesn't belong to the tree, right?
Right. I project my beliefs onto the tree. They are a point to or are about the tree. The tree itself doesn't have bark.
No, the tree doesn't have the concept
least-
of tree. The
yeah, the
tree
concept.
isn't the concept.
But
The
if
tree-
someone
Yeah,
came around
yeah.
and said it could, what is the argument? That to say that they would be that would be contradictory or impossible. And I don't think there's an answer on your view.
So what is the question again? Please restate it.
The question is these conceptualizations, right, that are independent from our attitude. You're saying that it can't be found in principle in the tree or any kind of rock, right? And I'm asking, what would be the argument for that, right? Or what would be a kind of demonstration to say that that in principle that it could be found in these things? That what would be the argument that would be contradictory? How is that contradictory?
Well, we're not finding them in the tree. We're attributing
That's
them to the
not
tree.
going to help you when it comes to
Because-
demonstrating impossibility.
Because what I'm doing is I'm describing, right? My concept of bark on a tree is just describing the tree. I'm not finding the concept of bark in the tree.
No, but in principle you could. What's the contradiction in that?
As
If
in,
there's no
in the
contradiction-
future, we could discover some technology where we chop the tree open and we find that it has these
All these concepts.
There's a point to the tree and go, look, it's a conceptualization of trees. That so it's everyone agrees.
I think that's another category.
That wouldn't happen.
I think that's
Right, but
another
what he's trying
category
to
error.
explain.
I think I understand.
Okay, so the outrage you feel, right, when someone suggests that you could find that in principle we could discover the conceptualization in the actual tree, right? That outrage
I'm
is
not
coming
feeling
from
outrage. I'm feeling confusion.
okay, confusion, is coming from you having ahead of time these categories decided in your head. That no, that belongs to the person, that doesn't belong to the tree. Trees aren't the kind of things that have those, but that's a people thing. So you came to the idea, and here comes this person going, hey, I think it's possible that we'll find concepts in the trees, right? And you just, it feels very, very wrong. So he's saying, likewise, when you are a person who thinks there's this clear delineation as clear as the one we just went over with trees and concepts, that between these things that are mental and these things that are physical, it just feels really confusing when someone comes and says, well, I don't see that. In principle, he's saying
Okay.
that what you say as a physicalist, in principle, mental, what you think is mental isn't really mental. There is no distinction between mental and physical, is as strange to him as the example that he just gave to you.
But I'm taking one more step further. That on Brenda's view, she would, I think, have to say these conceptualizations are in principle discoverable by some
No.
kind of technology.
No, I don't think they are.
I'm going a step further.
I'm saying, but I'm going to say that. See, I'm saying I'm just projecting. Oh my God. I'm just projecting on these attributes onto the tree. They're not in the tree.
Wait, but I don't think I don't think that. Is there something? Okay, maybe we're not disagreeing. Do you think there's a contradiction in what I said?
No, I think it's a misunderstanding. I think it is to me a category error because I divide up the world differently, perhaps. But
If
what
you
I'm
don't
saying,
think that it's a contradiction, then it's possible. So you have to say it's contradictory.
you mean logically possible. I don't think it's
Right.
metaphysically possible.
You accept metaphysical possibility all of a sudden?
Well, why wouldn't she?
Well,
I'm not a necessitarian.
Wait, no.
Well, why aren't you?
Wait. Well, I know Helena's going in the deep end with necessitarianism,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Well, it
but
seems like we can't. The initial condition problem we have here.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
But anyway, let's not get
But
sidetracked.
wait. So, what kind of metaphysical law are you appealing to here?
Well, the laws of our universe as we know them.
Yeah, I think we would have to be living in a different universe than the one we currently are.
Yeah, but what metaphysical law are we violating when I gave that claim that we can find these conceptualizations in trees, potentially? Well, that's redundant.
I don't know how to express it any differently than you're still making a category error, because I think that I'm a projection. We project our values and thoughts and beliefs onto things. They don't actually have.
But we don't
these things.
project conceptualizations onto trees. Like we're not making them as kind of mistake. Like I
thinking
think
that they have
what you're talking
concepts?
about.
No.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't
but
really
the tree's leaves are green. That's projection. Tree leaves aren't green. That's just what we think that we project.
Right.
My visual system below my level of awareness, attaches a label of some kind
Sure, okay.
onto the perception onto the precept of the tree's leaf and calls it green, right? And I have a linguistic structure and stuff, but itself it's just electromagnetic waves. There's no colors in reality. There's no colors.
We
in
have
reality.
some people have a different view of that. for
Well,
sure.
we don't want to go off on a tangent and start talking about the realism and perception stuff. I mean, maybe we do. I mean, that's
Wait,
okay.
do you think electromagnetic waves and are like rational?
No.
Do you think that you think neurons are rational? Potentially.
No.
Oh, okay. But you accept some kind of arrangement of natural kinds like atoms?
I think that my computer is rational, and that my brain, the neural network in my head is rational. So rational is simply obeying a set of logical rules, right? That's what I call rational.
Well, then there's no such thing as a non-rational entity.
No.
Everything obeys logic.
No, not everything does. No.
What do you?
Sorry, everything is.
The things Yeah, things obey physical laws, but I'm not saying physical laws. I'm just saying having logical relations of a
Well, look,
logical.
even in philosophy of physics, there's a debate between whether or not physical objects are merely described by the laws, or if they are constrained by the laws, right? So, and you might think that the same debate can be applied to logical rules. And I don't see why the physicalist wouldn't just say, "Oh, well, whatever you want to say about the physical laws, the logical relations are merely just descriptions of things, and they happen to be descriptions that have to be satisfied by everything, because there is no state of affairs that could not be described that way."
That's kind of the way I look at it.
I love that cat.
Do you accept non-causal explanations?
But he's just real quick before we go on to. He's just saying that. I mean, I think one of the things you can draw from what was just said is that it's probably a little sloppy to say that you think your computer obeys laws of logic.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I thought I said.
You think it is what you said. I
Yeah,
was
By obeys,
informed
do
that
you mean doesn't violate?
But there's a difference between obeying and accurately being described by. Right? And so someone like, at least in philosophy of physics, someone like Tim Maudlin is going to argue that there's a really like thick sense in which the laws of physics produce new states from the past, and in which physical states are constrained by the laws. Whereas anyone who takes up the Lewisian view in philosophy of physics is going to say that no, there's just descriptions of patterns that systematize all of the local matters of fact.
Can you say the name of the person who says that they really obey?
Oh, so Tim
I'd like to
Maudlin
learn
is
about that.
a good example of someone.
Can you spell it?
Well, it's spelled in the text chat, so it's Maudlin. He has a book called like The Metaphysics Within Physics or something like that.
So when it comes to when you were describing constraint, is that different from when X constrained Y? Is that a different statement than like X explains Y? Are those two different statements?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so
is there a camp? Because I know that there's people that want to say maybe that they don't see logical laws this way, but they want to say something like there are natural laws that explain our observations. But is that a third category in the case of natural laws?
So someone like David Albert, or really anyone who follows the kind of like neo-Lewisian program, is going to say that what the laws are is that they're the theorems of the best system. So the best system is a description of reality that is a really good trade-off between informativeness and simplicity. And
okay,
so
but how do you distinguish their system and theory?
Their system and what?
Theory.
Oh, well, I mean, so the best system is our best theory of.
Well, we want to distinguish explanation and description, right? The how and the that, I guess.
I mean, I can see why you might think these come apart. Trying to think now as to like what it is that someone would want to say. I mean, so here's something that like David Albert and Barry Lohr would sign up for. They would say that the best system is given by the mentaculus, or this particular theory they have that they call the mentaculus, and then everything you want to explain in all the other sciences, so all of the sciences beside physics, can then be explained in terms of the mentaculus.
Okay, so I guess I'm sorry. These are big words for me, but just to settle, we can say that we have a theory that explains, but yet describes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
seems strange, but I guess I'm not well read enough. I'm not well read.
Yeah, I'd have to do some thinking about like
that seems
how
just
exactly.
Weird to me.
Right, I have to do some thinking about how exactly these ideas relate for that sort of program. But so for folks who follow David Lewis, at least in philosophy of physics, the thought is that all that there ultimately is the Humean mosaic, which is just the collection of all of the local matters of fact. And between all those local matters of fact, there are no necessary connections. But nonetheless, there's patterns that systematize all of the local matters of fact, so that there's a really condensed description of the entire mosaic. And that condensed description is given by the best system. And then there's, one example of a proposed best system is this Mentaculous project that David Albert and Barry Lower and some other folks have.
Before I go, which I'm gonna do so soon, have you read any of Peter Lipton's stuff?
I haven't.
Didn't know if he was worth reading.
But anyway, so usually people think that the laws of logic have a different status than the laws of physics. But I think you can say this, right? You can say, well, look, whatever you want to say about the laws of physics, whether you want to be like David Albert or Tim Maudlin, you can, you could say that the laws of logic are just descriptions or just descriptive, and that even if the laws of physics constrain things in some like metaphysically thick sense, the laws of logic don't have to do that. Yeah, I love the word mentaculous.
Do you take a side?
What does it mean?
Well, so right. So, what does mentaculous mean? So mentaculous is so the mentaculous is a theory that is comprised of three postulates. So the first is whatever the fundamental laws turn out to be, whether that's Schrodinger's equation or something else. Then, or that is to say, the fundamental dynamical laws, the laws of motion, or the laws of how the states of the physical world change over time. That's the first postulate. The second postulate is about the universe beginning in a low entropy state, what's called the past hypothesis. And the third postulate has to do with the probability distribution that we put over all of the states that the world could possibly be in, right? So when you look at the macroscopic world, there are a whole bunch of different microscopic configurations that are indistinguishable from the position of that macroscopic description. So given a macroscopic description, you can say, like, what is the probability that you live in a world that has a particular microscopic description? That probability relationship is what's called the statistical postulate, and that's the third postulate. And then those three postulates assign a probability to every proposition that you could formulate in the sciences. They give an explanation for the difference between the past and the future. They give an explanation for all of the time asymmetry that we find in the special sciences. They give an explanation for causation. Right, so it gives you like an overarching conception of the world.
That's the second time in 2 days that I've heard somebody say overarching, and I'm pretty sure it's overarching.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, the mentaculous, that word itself comes from a Coen Brothers movie. I forget what the movie is called. It's a good movie though.
Is the Mentaculous near
from
near
Serious Man?
Yeah, Serious Man.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yes, that guy was bug fuck crazy.
Yeah, his brother has the
Seth,
the
you can say Seth. You can say arc or you can say arch. It works either way.
His brother or whatever has a
Guys are so
notepad.
mentaculous.
No,
right
you can't,
lots
Gus.
of.
Yeah, I got the biggest mentaculi around. I'm metaculizing even as we speak.
I guess if you want to look like an idiot, you can say whatever you want, Gus, right?
No.